today, and we will leave you with a... I can't do it. We'll do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
Yeah.
That's tomorrow, and that is it for us today. I'm Bill O'Reilly.
And he's the... It's good to start a show with an apology. There we go. We have a special guest with us today. Dr. Drew Pinsky, board-certified internist and addiction medicine specialist, gained popular attention, hosting the show Loveline. You know that. And he's the author of 5 best-selling books, currently hosts a variety of programs, including Health Uncensored and the Dr. Drew podcast and Ask Dr. Drew. He's very busy. Please welcome back to the show, Dr. Drew.
Jimmy, good to be here. I love the apology. I look for every reason I can to apologize when I've gotten something wrong. And I think it's a good example for the world right now.
Oh, look at that. Okay. Well, the reason why I had you on is because you ran right into the YouTube censors. Now, I've run into them myself.
I'm sure.
So you said this weekend, YouTube creators accused me of spreading medical misinformation and took down 2 videos with an MD and a lawyer. I've been a board-certified physician for over 40 years, twice as long as YouTube's been around. So let's take a closer look at the timestamps that they say are harmful. But before I do that, I just want to show you that you can give misinformation about medicine as long as it's in the favor of Big Pharma.
If it goes a certain direction, that's what's in my thread. It goes a certain direction, you're good. So, and by the way, let's examine these things. I welcome this opportunity. And by the way, when I was watching your X thread today, they're like, I can't believe you're bringing in this vax pusher. Vax pusher? I'm a vax pusher? It was like, what? I've been bringing the alarm about myocarditis in adolescent males and excoriating the mandates for 2-3 years. But anyway, whatever.
My experience is that you've been on it. So let me just show you some of the stuff that pharma-funded media pushes and that it's okay. Just for instance.
And I know this sounds like an incremental piece of news, but sit on this for a second enough to absorb what this means, right? What this means is that we can get there with we can end this thing. It means that instead of the instead of the virus being able to hop from person to person to person to person, spreading and spreading, sickening some of them, but not all of them, and the ones that it doesn't sicken don't know they have it, and then they give it to even more people because they didn't recognize they were, right? Instead of the virus being able to hop from person to person to person, potentially mutating and becoming more virulent and drug resistant along the way, now we know that well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person. A vaccinated person gets exposed to the virus does not infect them. The virus cannot then use that person to go anywhere else. It cannot use a vaccinated person as a host to go get more people. That means the get us to the end of this.
Okay, so there's like at least 3 or 4 different things she said there that are not true and incorrect and would be considered misinformation.
Jimmy, I challenge you to find anything she said there that was accurate, that was true.
Well, she almost
From
said
top to bottom, that is nonsense,
yes.
Totally inaccurate, complete BS, and because it's delivered with smug certitude, I would say it's not only misinformation, it's done with intent, it's disinformation. It's both.
Both. She almost said that the virus can hop from person to person to person for a second. She almost said that, but she didn't. She said that if you get vaccinated, it can't, which we all know they didn't. That's not true. That's not true. But not only did she say that, by the way, she's like the Meryl Streep of misinformation. You see how she delivered it? That was really quite a performance.
But mind you, that is up on YouTube.
That's still up.
We put in our thread. That exists. No, that's not down-regulated. That's fact up-regulated.
That's right.
I'm sure.
So if you give misinformation in a certain direction, one that doesn't harm Big Pharma or the establishment narrative, you're allowed to spread that kind of misinformation. Just like when Dr. Fauci says about masks, which we're going to show you in a second. So there's myriad things that you can say that's not true, incorrect, would be considered misinformation and a conspiracy. But as long as it props up the establishment and Big Pharma, that's okay. And because I have a video that I've had on my Twitter feed and I played on the show, it shows Bill Gates, Dr. Fauci, the President of the United States, and everybody in between saying exactly what she just said. That if you get the stops the virus from, and that was never true because we know because of a hearing at the European Parliament when they questioned an executive from Pfizer, did you test to see if the transmission and contraction before you brought it to market, and said no, we didn't. So they were spreading this, and Pfizer didn't even test to see. And my guess is they didn't test. They probably did test to see, but the test didn't come out the way they like, so they buried that test. That's just a guess. I can't say that.
That is potentially misinformation.
Yeah.
That one I can't substantiate. But I would, if it turned out to be true, it would not be that shocking.
Right. So I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that could be a possibility. But
don't forget, in the Pfizer, look at Joseph Fryman's analysis of the Pfizer original data, including points. But they excluded anyone that they lost in the first 2 weeks after vaccination, which everyone knows if there's going to be a very serious, it's in those first 2 weeks. So if anybody died and didn't show up in follow-up, we didn't know it because they excluded everyone in that 2-week window that they lost.
So, and I would say 99% of the general public have no idea about what you just said, what I just said. They still believe this. They're still angry at people who didn't take the. They were told that the pandemic. Now, I had Dr. Robert Malone on my show early, right around the same time she said this, and he explained to me that you don't want to do. In fact, that the leaky you can still transmit and contract the virus, and that you don't want to over-vaccinate during a pandemic like this because that will actually create more virulent strains. Of what they were saying. They're saying that if you get vaccinated, if the unvaccinated are the people who create more, that's not the case. And so everything she said was backwards. Everything she said, but that is still up. And you got taken down. And here's the first thing that you got taken down. Medical misinformation. They gave you the timestamp, which is very helpful.
Yes, it is, because you should play it. It's an interesting
I'll play
conversation.
Here it is.
Now, Dr. Victory is married. I came upon her in the last couple of years, and she's been helping out with some of these shows, and she was my guest on that day. Turned out, didn't know this, but she's married to my best friend from medical school. She's a board-certified ER doctor. She's a disaster preparedness expert. She's a public health official. She has public health training from Harvard. She's very smart and a very good doctor. Listen to what she said, that YouTube feels needs to be canceled.
And the real tragedy with this, Drew, is that the vast majority of the people who've been injured are young, healthy people, people who were under the age of 50, who had fundamentally zero risk from they all got 96%, 98% of the population has documented and well known that they had. These are people who would have done fine if they'd just been left alone. But instead, they were maimed, many of them against their better judgment, against their best, interest. They could, they had to do it to keep their jobs, to go to school, to whatever it is. And so they were harmed.
So that was this part that they said you couldn't say on YouTube, right? That
would do egregious harm. Now, while on one hand, Rachel Maddow, I challenge you to find anything she said that was accurate and true. By the same token, I challenge you to find anything Dr. that is not accurate or true. Anything. One thing she said that was not simply and absolutely true. So
did they tell you exact? Because I actually, very recently, I find that the people at YouTube have been actually helpful. When they flag something that they don't want to let go out on their airwaves, they'll tell you, they'll give you a timestamp, and they'll say this is the thing. So did they tell you specifically what part of that?
I think we recently put up. First of all, we had to go to re-education camp. Are you aware of this?
Yes,
they sent me
I've done that.
They sent us to re-education camp, which was ridiculous. I was hoping it would actually be a place like a Maoist China where we could show up and I could take pictures and things. But I guess we're going that direction. And in there, we posted some of the things that they suggested would result in egregious harm. It's ridiculous.
So they don't know,
they don't have any doctors or anybody medical evaluating these things. So there's nobody for me to talk to. There's nobody making these judgments. I can't appeal to anybody because it's a bunch of IT clerks.
So they didn't tell you specifically what, they just gave you the timestamp. They didn't tell you specifically what part of that was the egregious part or the offending?
It was, I think they said it was particularly where she said, she has a colorful way of expressing herself. And I think the maiming got to them, that people were maimed. It's safe and effective. It doesn't maim.
Oh, well, I have to, first of all, let me just say, of course she's wrong, and that everything she said is incorrect, and that the YouTube scientists are the ones that I follow and the people at the FDA and the CDC, because they say the effective and people haven't been maimed. Of course, there's been side effects and adverse events that's been well documented, but of course, maiming, that's not that I know of. But so anyway, so yeah, we reject and denounce what she said. I'm just showing this as a news segment, so people know what not to say. That's what I'm saying.
Do you hear that, YouTube? Do you hear what Jimmy's saying?
I hope YouTube knows that I'm abiding by their rules, right? So that's why I wanted to zone in on exactly what she said that was wrong, to point it out to people that is wrong. Right. Nobody got maimed by the. If I take 2 or 3 every morning, they're fantastic. So I also. I just want to show you this. So you said, by the way, here's Dr. Fauci in 2023 insisting there's no doubt that masks work, despite the data and opposition from public health experts like epidemiologist Dr. Harvey Reich, a Yale professor, who told me, in reality, what you're talking about is putting up a chain link fence and hoping that it blocks mosquitoes. So the virus, the coronavirus, is smaller than the openings in those masks, meaning it can slip through that mask. In fact, well, here, let me just show you what Dr. Fauci actually said on CNN. This is all in your Twitter thread.
There is a perception out there by many, how many I don't know, that they don't work, and that the data concludes that they didn't work in the first go-round. Respond to that on masks.
So now he brought him on after the Cochrane study, which now the Cochrane study was done by one of the leading smarty pants guys when it comes to this stuff. I forget what's his name, but anyway, they did this metadata analysis, and they found that there was no reduction in infection of people who wore masks on mass, and they didn't, right? And so that was supposed to be case closed on the mask thing. So here is Smirkanis, to his credit, on CNN, which I never thought I'd see this happen, confronting Dr. Fauci with the science, because he had told him about the study I just told you about. And watch what Dr. Fauci says to this.
Yeah, well, that's not so. I mean, when you're talking about at the population level, that the data are less strong than knowing that if you look on a situation.
So what he's using slippery, mealy-mouthed criminal words, right? So
he's twisting himself into a pretzel.
Yeah, he's saying if you look at population level, he's saying
which is what this was.
This
was a meta-analysis. The question was, does masking work? Answer: no. Thank you, Dr. Fauci.
So he said, well, if you look at the population, I mean, if you look at the tests, if you look at the trials, and we look at the data, no, it doesn't work. If you have a group of people who wear masks and a group of people who don't, no, it doesn't. He uses the term population level. Okay, so he's trying to use terms that confuse people, and he's saying the data is less strong, meaning it's not strong, meaning that the data shows it doesn't work. But he chooses to say it's less strong, which is a very misleading way to talk about this, because what he's doing right here is trying to mislead people. And he's doing it. Okay, so here we go.
As an individual protecting themselves or protecting them from spreading it, there's no doubt that masks work.
So he's saying, but on an individual level, there's no doubt, he's saying, that masks work. So they don't work if you actually do a random control trial. They don't work if you look at the data. They don't work if you look at a group of people who wear masks and a group of people who don't. It doesn't work at that. But individually, it will work, which makes absolutely zero sense. And
let me tell you what he's leaning on, which is that if you have a perfectly fitted N95 mask with no leaks anywhere, your glasses don't steam up when you're breathing, no leaks, and you wear it 100% of the time, you never breathe, you never eat, you never do anything around other people, well, that might have a little something. But the reality of the human being is nobody ever wears the mask properly or ever wears it 100% of the time. Mask up between bites, everybody. Mask up between bites, which is one of the most insane statements of all time. And be super clear, surgical mask, cloth mask, zero efficacy. It doesn't distinguish that either.
So N95 masks, there is a certain amount of protection that you can get from them if you do exactly what you said. You get it fitted, and then you wear it so tight that when you take it off, it literally leaves a mark on your face.
Because these are aerosol respiratory viruses. Anything sends it out 60 feet, anything, and in. And it's not spit, it's not bacteria in your mouth that the surgeon is trying to protect from the surgical field. It's an aerosolized respiratory virus. And the masks that people wear in the surgical suites, they're not worrying about respiratory viruses. They're worrying about bacteria.
So, okay, let's see what else he has to say here.
Different studies give different percentages of advantage of wearing it, but there's no doubt that the weight of the studies, and there have been many studies, indicate the benefit of wearing masks.
So that's still up on YouTube, I'm sure, and that is categorically false.
And so here, Dr. Kevin Bass says, this is nonsense, and here's why. To do science on masks, you have a mask group and you have an unmasked group. You compare the rate of infection in each group. This is called a randomized trial. This is how science is done. If the rate of infection is the same, then masks don't work. That was what the studies on masks actually showed. So there's no difference. Now, there is simply no such thing as scientific studies showing that masks work at an individual level. We just talked about that N95. Okay. And now here is one more video where Dr. Fauci's confronted him. So the reason I'm showing you this is to show you that certain misinformation is okay. If it's misinformation that is endorsed by the establishment and big pharma, then it's okay. So here's
official misinformation, Jimmy. Official misinformation.
So he's being asked about masks once again, and here's what he says this time.
CDC is advising all Americans now to wear a cloth mask, but not the surgical mask. Save those for the healthcare officials. Why the change now? Because most of us have been walking around going to the grocery store not wearing the mask because that was the original recommendation.
Well, we have to make sure we don't forget that the most important thing is to keep this 6-foot physical distance from individuals.
So now you
which
just
they made up. Which the 6 feet is made up out of thin air.
So Dr. Fauci originally said at the beginning on 60 Minutes, he said, don't wear masks. He goes, it might make you feel better, but it's not providing the protection you think it does. In fact, it actually has negative consequences because you start touching your face and so it's bad, right? And then for some reason, they flipped on that and want everybody to start wearing masks. Now, my theory is why Dr. Fauci flipped on that was because I know that Dr. Fauci likes to use fear to manipulate people. And if everybody's walking around wearing a mask, it's going to create a sense of fear around people that there's something we need to be afraid of, even though he was telling the truth when he said masks don't work on 60 Minutes at the beginning of... And then he flipped. And I think he flipped because he was trying to do everything to manipulate people into taking an emergency use authorized product that Big Pharma wanted us to take. That's just a theory. There's no way I can prove it, but that's my theory because he did flip on that. And now we're showing you that he's now making stuff up. So what he just said there about, well, the most important thing is to keep 6 feet. Now, why do I say he made that up? Because he made it up. Here's the Daily Mail revealed Dr. Fauci confesses that he made up the 6 feet social distancing and masking. He said he doesn't.
Redfield and Count Francis Collins have confirmed that, as well as other people I've interviewed who were in the room when this was decided. Thin air. They were thinking it was real. They were coming to terms with the fact that it was probably 30 to 60 feet, but they couldn't get people to comply with that. So they went, all right, just 6 feet.
The
world complied with that too. The world. I was in France during COVID. Greece, 6 foot distancing there too was unbelievable.
I still go in certain airports. They have 6 foot on the floor. Anyway, here is. He also said he was unaware of studies recommending masks for kids, meaning there aren't any.
No, there were never anything, nothing ever. But we were only one of, I think, 2 countries in the world that were mandating masking little kids, which was abuse. We damaged a generation. It was obvious. This is what was so upsetting to me. I kept saying 8 to 15-year-olds are going to be damaged. Their mental health is going to be damaged forever. And now they will tell you they were damaged. Little did I know, we were also going to damage 18 to 30-year-olds who really have just been harmed by this. And I hope they all are, if they are not, that they at least become pissed at what was done with them. It was inexcusable.
Well,
the government did that to you.
Dr. Fauci also, I don't have the video of this, but he did claim that knit condoms worked, but only on Christmas. Anyway, but here he is going to be confronted with this. So she's going to confront him at a congressional hearing, and he's going to admit that the 6 foot distancing rule, which he just said was the most important thing, even more important than masks, He just said that. He's now going to admit that.
And let me stop you. One thing that I became aware of right about the time that this was all going on, when they were getting into their mask mandates, it became very clear that nasal lavage would be much more effective than masking in terms of reducing transmission of this virus.
What does that mean? Nasal lavage?
Saline. What's that?
Did you mean just squirting your nose with saline?
Yeah, three time a day nasal lavage would dramatically reduce transmission. And with betadine, it dramatically reduces it even further. And we would have gotten taken off to YouTube for saying that at the time.
So here he is being confronted, and he's going to try to pretend like he didn't make that up. Watch this.
You also represent the type of science where you confess that you made up the including 6 feet social distancing and masking of children.
I never said I made anything up.
You admitted that you made it up. You made it up.
I didn't say I made it up.
So are you saying this is fake news, Mr. Fauci?
I didn't say I made anything up.
What did you say?
I said that it is not based in science and it just appeared.
But
and
it just appeared
with both hands.
So when he says this about masks.
But not the surgical mask, save those for the healthcare officials. Why the change now? Because most of us have been walking around going to the grocery store not wearing masks because that was the original recommendation.
Well, we have to make sure we don't forget that the most important thing is to keep this 6-foot physical distance from individuals.
So now he's now saying that's not based in science and that it just appeared. It just appeared, and then he repeated it and said it's the most important thing. Isn't that amazing, Doctor?
It's amazing. It's amazing that he knew it was the most important thing, and yet it had just appeared.
It just appeared.
Yeah. It appeared because Francis Collins made it up, and and Redfield has said the same thing. He was head of the CDC that they never should have done that. It was a mistake. It was a complete fabrication. How Fauci didn't know it came from those guys is astonishing, and why he was such an enthusiast for it is even more astonishing. By the way, the term social distancing really didn't exist until this pandemic. It's a new term.
Yeah. And I just want to, I just remember all the people at grocery stores picking fights over this, like they were defending society.
Yes.
And they were just really moral do-gooders who are just waiting for their entire life for the authority to give them permission to crack down on other people.
So, Jimmy, that is a really important point. I think everybody, the way mass formations occur, about 5 to 10% of the humans go, hey, this is BS, something's wrong here. About 70% look around and go, I just want to get on with my life. Leave me be, I'll comply, whatever. And 20% are evangelists and are immediately hypnotized by the whole thing. If you are someone that reported your neighbors for having a barbecue, if you were somebody who was yelling at somebody in a hardware store for not wearing a mask, if you were someone fighting because somebody was too close and you started swinging at them, you need to examine yourself, because everybody believes if they were in Germany in 1935, they would try to kill Hitler. But you, the person Jimmy just described, would be a prison guard. I guarantee you. And you need to know that about yourself. It's an important thing, and do not let it happen next time.
That is the little fascist inside people came out during
the communists, the fascists, whatever that 20% is of hypnotized. I'm reading a book called The True Believer. I thought this shit ended in the 20th century. We said it was writ large. I thought, okay, these mass formations, the Jacobins sort of invented it, and we're done with this now. Turns out this always happens. The witch hunts, it always happens. Humans have a tendency to be this way. And it breaks down the same way all the time. And that 20% is the true believer, and you need to learn about true believers. And if you're one of them, you need to watch yourself, because you will get swept into something that you will not be proud of.
Well, it lent itself to, I lament comedians, right? So I was always so proud, seriously proud to be part of the comedy brotherhood or whatever you want to call it. But to see comedian after comedian get on stage, comedians I've respected for 20 years, get on stage and shame people for trying to get informed about an experimental medical treatment that they were being forced to take or they would lose their job. And they would say, don't do your own research. And they'd say, you're just a slob sitting on your couch in your underwear. First of all, I'm wearing underwear all the time. I don't know what that has to do with anything, why people keep saying that. You're probably wearing underwear when you told me not to do my own research. But the point is, doing your own research just meant that you're reading, right? I was in my own underwear when I figured out that masks didn't work. I was in my own underwear when I figured out that the virus actually came from a lab, and it didn't make me a racist to say so, and that Fauci tried to cover that up. It didn't make me, I was in my underwear when I figured out that herd immunity and that he was lying about herd immunity and that natural immunity is a real thing. I was in my underwear when I figured out all that stuff. And I figured out that lockdowns didn't work and there was no science behind that. In fact, they had negative consequences. I was in my underwear when I figured out all that stuff. And so this whole thing, don't do your own research. That's what that led to. It led to comedians who are supposed to be professional contrarians who poke holes in the status quo became mouthpieces for the establishment and professional managerial class enforcers of the narrative. And they shamed you if you wanted to think for yourself, because you're too dumb to think for yourself. You're supposed to let an expert. You're supposed to trust the science. You don't know
how the journalist. How about the New York Times editorial board mandating public health policy? Who the F are they to have an opinion about physicians and public policy? They should shut the hell up. And as long as we're taking aim at each other's profession, the physician part was egregious for many, many reasons. But one of the most egregious was we couldn't give informed consent to our patients, and doctors did that without consideration or concern. I was profoundly, to this day, when patients, older 90, 100-year-old patients ask me, should I take a booster? I tell them I don't know, because we don't have the data. That's the informed consent.
You don't think that doing a study on 12 mice is not adequate to
for a variant that left us 18 months ago?
And I try to tell people when I have disagreement, when they disagree with me about all this stuff, or the boosters, or say, do you, like I saw Martina Navratilova tweet out just the other day that I just got my flu. booster. I'm not taking
fine.
any chances. And I'm like,
Good for her.
good for you. You are taking chances. And
That's true.
Just so you know that the number 1 and 2 person in charge of the at the FDA resigned over the booster program. Just so you know. And then and what did they do? Did they reevaluate? No, they just got 2 more lackeys go-alongs to take their place because the people who stood up against the booster program resigned over it. Okay, people don't know that. Of course, that's not going to get reported.
No, Jimmy. Those two need to come. It seems to me those two they were apparently excellent scientists. I remember when the story when it happened. I was aware of it, and those two need to resurface and they need to tell their story. Somebody's got to find them and get their story. I don't know why they've been so quiet. I believe they have an ethical obligation to tell their story. Maybe the new administration they will.
I'm sure they had to. I'm pretty sure I have a feeling of why they're not speaking out more.
Well, they probably had to sign a bunch of non-disclosure stuff
yes.
in order to get out. So.
You're going to sign this non-disclosure. Either your signature or your brains are going to be on this non-disclosure, all right? So we all know how big pharma. So there's even more to this. So you brought on a lawyer, right? And at 38. So they
great guy, brilliant lawyer. He was defending some people who had some. And he made some sort of sweeping generalities about how many people he thought had been harmed by this. I don't think his numbers were correct. I didn't say, oh, you're absolutely right, sir. I thought it was, I'm not sure, but I didn't get into confronting him. Do you have the tape?
So yeah, so here's what he said. Now, keep in mind, this is this guy's opinion. This is not
his experience.
FDA, CDC, certainly not Fauci, and it's certainly not YouTube science. This is this guy's experience and opinion, which I know has got to be wrong. But here, let me play it for you anyway.
I believe about 500,000 people have died from. You're currently representing people. One of my clients, unfortunately, is extremely ill. Her spinal cord has been damaged. Her diaphragm no longer works properly. She's having trouble breathing, and she's 40 years old, and she took it because of her job. That's a lady named Danny Baker, by the way. She goes by Coerced Nurse on Twitter, and she's a fantastic client to have, and we're going to try to make a point with that.
Now, of course, that's misinformation. That can't possibly be true because of effective, and it's been tested. Egregious
harm to let this man speak.
Yeah, so
he seems like somebody who's intent on hurting people.
So what? So I'm rejecting and denouncing what he's saying. If YouTube is listening, and I know they are, you say it's not medical misinformation for someone to state their belief that a large number of people were harmed by a medical product or a study. That is his opinion based on evidence from his cases. Well, that is not okay. So you stand by that, Dr. True?
It's not okay. I must be in error.
You must be in error.
I don't want to affirm that on your show.
And so because you didn't adequately push back against him when he was spreading that kind of,
I don't think that would have helped. I really don't think it would have helped.
Well, hopefully it's helping because that's what I'm doing.
You didn't. You're very categorical about it, so I wouldn't have been quite so firm.
I mean, it's unfortunate you didn't push back on his crazy talk, and because that's what that is. But so when you didn't push back, they made you go to YouTube training school, right? I must attend YouTube's re-education training and be a good boy for 90 days, or else they will delete my channel and its 1,000+ videos. Now I've had to do that before, and I did it. Because they will delete your channel if you don't do it.
Well, we put up some of the questions there. Look at that. The one on the right is one I like.
Tammy posts a video after getting the influenza. She shares that she became permanently paralyzed after receiving her seasonal influenza shot. In the video, she warns others not to get the influenza because you're all going to suffer the same way I did. Is this a violation? Yes. I would say yes, that is a violation. That you can't. That's not true, right? What?
But think about they're using an example of someone's own personal medical experience, misadventure. And you want to create a group of evangelists that are paranoid, you silence somebody like that. Because she's going to find other ways to get people sort of on her team. And if it looks like somebody's silencing her, it's a way to fuel paranoia, as opposed to letting her post her damn opinion and her experience and describe it and have people interact with her and go, well, it's very rare. Maybe it's terrible to happen to you. Okay, that would mitigate it. That would put it in context. Instead, silence, misinformation. The state has spoken.
I mean, if you read their intent, they say YouTube doesn't allow content that poses a serious risk or of egregious harm by spreading medical misinformation that contradicts local health authorities or the World Health Organization guidance about specific health conditions and substances. The policy includes the following. So,
World Health Organization people,
which is a criminal organization.
When you hear that, See, I went down a rabbit hole with the hepatitis B. I've been telling people
it's important to give that to babies.
Well, I was part of the research of the early hepatitis B in the early 80s, and we were concerned with maternal fetal transmission of hepatitis B in China, where it was common. Now it only happens in the setting of IV drug use. And you think for a second that in this country, an IV drug user wouldn't be tested for hepatitis B, or that her child wouldn't get hepatitis B had been tested as soon as the child emerged? But in the name of equity, the World Health Organization mandate that every child, as they come out of the birth canal, gets the hepatitis B. I can think of no indication for it. None. It's the most absurd thing in the world. 3-part. And nobody is getting maternal fetal. There's like 1,200 cases of hepatitis B in the country every year, and it's all in drug users. And believe me, if they were pregnant, we would be all over that. Yes, use the everybody. Oh my God, what a mess.
Well, did you ever think that maybe there's only 1,200 cases of it? It's because everybody got their.
But that's the point. We did it. We vaccinated everybody. We vaccinated healthcare workers, and we needed it, and we took it. But babies in the first hours of life, this is bizarre.
Well, it's not bizarre to the FDA or the CDC, and that's who I have to go with. They're at the YouTube, so it makes sense to me. You are wrong once again. You say these aren't. So you've had strikes before, and tell people what happened the first time.
My previous strikes were typically during where we dared to have conversation about alternative practices for treatment of. We ended up having to say, to convert our conversations in such a way that we would say I word or H word if we were going to talk about ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine. Because if those words were spoken, even if I were to say, I really don't think these things are effective. I know people are using it, but I've just not seen it be very good. Just the word out. That's it. You're done.
Yeah, we couldn't say ivermectin. That was for sure. And I certainly couldn't say that it treated. The FDA and the CDC says it doesn't, and so I can't contradict them or the scientists at YouTube. But so you called them up when you got flagged by talking about ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and you had a conversation with them?
It took a long time. We had multiple attempts at getting to a human being. That was the hard part. And once we got to human being and explained that these are physicians and professionals discussing pros and cons, it's not evangelical one way or the other. It's just we're trying to get to the truth. And I talked to a lot of silenced people like McCullough and RFK Jr. First time I spoke to him, he goes, "You're very courageous to speak to me." And I said, "For an attorney and a doctor to speak publicly, that takes courage. We are in big trouble." And we were. He sort of tipped me off 3 years ago that things were not as I thought they were. In any event, and they would every time they would let us off the hook. And we told them we'll play by the rules. We just got to know what the rules are, and we need to understand why and what the rationale is for them. But inevitably, they just tune up the algorithm, and getting to a human being is almost impossible. Which is why we went on X this time, and they because Elon was retweeting all of my stuff this time. Oh well, now they immediately reversed everything without us talking to them. I guess you're right.
So this has been reversed?
Yes.
You're kidding.
Shocking, Jimmy.
So the stuff that I'm playing right now, I don't have to do the song and dance over?
Well, it still is egregious misinformation, but they're not willing to stand by that right now.
And that's because Elon Musk got involved. That's probably it looks like it anyway. So I like what you say here though at the bottom. You wanted to talk to you said I wanted to have a clinical conversation with the person on YouTube side who was judging his interviews.
I want to talk to a clinician. I want to talk to a scientist. I want to talk to a doctor.
And you
give
said
me a doctor to speak to understand, so I can appeal my case, and I can understand your position. There is no doctor. There is no scientist. There's nobody like that over there. Nothing. There's a bunch of IT clerks. That's it. That's it.
So
nobody.
They don't have a physician on their mind?
No, there's nobody like that over there. Nothing like that they have on staff.
So to me, that's the biggest. So I remember there was a hearing when Twitter was being raked over the coals in front of Congress, and the woman Vijay or whatever her name was, they kept saying that you censored Dr. Bhattacharya. He's a leading guy in his field from Stanford. You did this to Dr. McCullough, one of the most cited doctors in the world. You did it to Dr. Rob Malone, who has 5 patents on. And you did. Do you have a medical? They're like, no. Did you go to medical school? No. But you are censoring the leading guys in their field. Mm-hmm. And they're like, yeah, we are. And so that's what this reminded me of when you made this point that I wanted to talk to somebody at YouTube who's a clinician, and that person doesn't exist.
No, listen, when I first met Jay Bhattacharya, which was now about 3 or 4 years ago, I just thought, oh my God, this is the guy they're choosing to silence and attack and take what do they call it, a devastating takedown, according to Fauci or Collins or one of these guys. And I thought this guy is a consummate professional. He's a brilliant professor. He's an extraordinary human being. This is their target. And the fact that he now is going to head up the NIH is a level of poetic, it's Shakespearean. I never imagined we'd be here. And when he told me that he was being considered, I almost cried because he deserves that position. And it's a complete reversal of this nonsense.
That is going to be a sea change. It's very akin to the spies and the spooks inside the deep state following Tulsi Gabbard around through airports and putting her on the terrorist watch list. And then she becoming the head of the director of national intelligence. That it's like something you see in a book, you wouldn't believe it, or a movie. It's really, so it happened with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, it's happened with Tulsi Gabbard, it's now going to happen with RFK Jr. So there is a sea change happening, and these are all positive things. And I'm just glad that you went to YouTube re-education camp, because if people don't know what happens there is they remove the part of your brain that identifies BS and they replace it with cats bopping their head to the latest beats. Anyway, so it works. I'm saying it works. So
thank goodness troublemakers like me are brought to heel.
Yes, anyway, I appreciate you making time to come on and talk about this. I think this is important. Facebook has now decided, Zuckerberg has decided to not to hook up with fact checkers. Yes. So they're not fact checkers, and I have to remind people this: that if you go to PolitiFact or you go to Fact Check, whatever, they are people taking money from billionaires that have a political axe to grind, and they have a narrative they want to spread. So lots of the people that I knew in comedy in Hollywood for 20 years think I'm a piece of garbage now because Facebook, they all go on Facebook, right? Because I'm in that age demographic. They all go on Facebook, and they would see every time Facebook would, this is bad misinformation that I was trying to spread on, and they thought I was a grifter spreading misinformation, but nothing I ever put up on Facebook was incorrect. In fact, I would make fun of their fact checks and show that they're quibbling with my headline. That almost every one of their fact checks was them quibbling with my headline or saying that I said something I didn't say.
Yep.
Like, for instance, I said there was a chip inside the said that. They said I said that. No, what I did was I reported on Anthony Bourla, the head of Pfizer, saying that they put a chip in a medicine that people take. And and you can imagine the compliance that they can tell if you took it or not. And I reported that, and they pretended I said something else. So the fact checkers are not fact checkers; they are political hacks. And what Zuckerberg hasn't done is then taken time to apologize to people like me, whose reputation he's ruined and dragged through the mud with people who've known me most of my life in Hollywood. And now I'll never get those people back. I'll never get them to listen because Facebook said something. And so, go ahead.
If you look at my original thread on the YouTube thing, it was actually Zuckerberg that sort of influenced or maybe even inspired us to go forward, because our opening statement is, hey, come along with the change, come along with the movement towards freedom again in this country and towards the ethics and the values of our founding principles, upon which free speech is numero uno. And that was sort of what our appeal was. Come on, get with it, YouTube. Everyone else is coming along. Why not you? Well, we'll see.
We'll see. Well, what we need is the Twitter files for YouTube. That would be fantastic. Yes. And you know, I wish Zuckerberg would turn over, just like Elon Musk did, to journalists. Here's all our conversations with the Biden administration, the FBI, and the people who wanted to censor you, the people over at the FDA and the CDC and Health and Human Services. Here's all our emails. Here's what actually happened. But now we got to tune into Joe Rogan to hear what he says they said. And it would be very helpful. He's not going to do that. I think Zuckerberg's a very slippery cat, and just like Dr. Fauci, very slippery. But anyway, at least he's getting away from working with fake fact checkers after my reputation is now ruined. Now, you know, luckily they have a harder time discrediting you than they do me, right? Because you're an actually accredited physician. You have a history.
Yeah, but I would argue that you have prevailed, you have persevered, and there's a new age ahead upon which new relationships will be built that will be more genuine and more appreciative of the effort you've made.
Fingers crossed. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I include you in that group of new friends, and I'm very grateful for your courage and for your friendship. It's been really good, nice getting to know you and your wife.
Thank you. You as well.
Okay, well, Dr. Drew, everybody check out all his shows. You're a very busy man. The Dr. Drew podcast, Ask Dr. Drew, Health Uncensored, which is still on. You're still on YouTube, so that's a big deal. So
I'm there at the moment. We're also on Rumble and everything else, and we're even trying to jack up our Facebook presence. If he's really serious about it, well, let's see if we can get going there too. But X has been a major outlet for us, and so we appreciate everyone over there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, a lot of the other social media platforms are afraid of X because X is actually giving you a modicum of free speech, and that they don't allow, and they're now the #1 news site in the world. So you know what I found out? Get this, just before I let you go, that of course the Washington Post numbers are down and New York Times numbers are down, and because they've been lied to. They lied to him about Russiagate, and they lied to him about downs, and they lied to him about a myriad of things. Most recently, that Joe Biden was sharp and effective. They did that for 4 straight years, and people aren't reading or going. The number 1 and 2 reason why people subscribe to the New York Times is so they can do their crossword puzzle and Wordle. Did you? I don't know. My producer told me that the other day. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, that's the 2 reasons why people.
That's expensive. That's an expensive hobby.
I agree.
I used to love the New York Times. I used to get the LA Times, New York Times, read them both every day. And then they did a few stories I made in the LA Times, and I realized how much they distort the truth. And I started seeing nothing that I could even relate to. And so I canceled the LA Times. And then all of a sudden, New York Times was the same thing. Very sad. It's very sad.
Yeah. And once you're a part of a news story, you realize how much the news isn't the news.
It's called the Gell-Mann amnesia. You ever heard of that?
No.
Oh, it's a term. It's about a physicist named Dr. Gell-Mann who looked at the paper, and when he'd see stories on physics, which is something he knew well, he'd go, God, they get it so wrong. They're distorting. They're just ridiculous. And then he went on to assume that all the other complicated stories about economics and the international scene were true. That's called Gell-Mann amnesia. It's all wrong. It's all false. And it's never been worse.
It's never been worse. And a big problem was in 1996 when Bill Clinton took us from 50 giant media companies down to just 6. So we used to have 50 media companies. We should have had 150, but we had 50, and they were giant themselves. And then Bill Clinton passed the Telecommunications Act, and that brought us down to just 6. And the reasoning they used was because there was this new thing called the internet, and now everybody's going to have a voice. Well, we see what happens, right? So those same controlling billionaire class interests are controlling our voice on social media and YouTube. And so thank God there's places that we can go to now, like Twitter and Rumble, and hopefully there'll be more places like that I don't have to twist myself in a pretzel to cover a story like this.
Right.
Okay, Dr. Drew, thank you very much, brother. See you soon.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Bye-bye. Okay, over to Steph.
Do we have to go to a quick break because we're going to bring on Danny?
We got to bring on our next guest. So let's go to a break, and we're going to get Danny Haiphong on to talk about TikTok, of all things.